Hi, my name is Douglas McComb, and today we're going to be looking at identifying stakeholders within an Agile project management framework. We begin with looking at who are the stakeholders. An Agile project stakeholder is anyone who is a direct user, an indirect user, a manager of users, a senior manager, operations staff member, or those who fund the project, any support or help desk staff members, auditors, the program manager, the developers that are working on the systems that integrate or interact with one under the development, or maintenance professionals potentially affected by the development and or the deployment of any software project. A stakeholder can be thought of as a human risk factor and can jeopardize a project in the same way that any risk can. There's possibility of engaging the stakeholder in order to influence his or her level of engagement on the project and minimizing the human risk factor. They all have interest in the project, and their satisfaction to the outputs of the project are vital to the success of the project. Stakeholder identification in Agile projects is less formal than traditional forms of project management. They are placed in the categories in regards to how they affect the project. We are going to look at five categories of potential stakeholders and how they are addressed in the project. We begin with the unaware stakeholders. Many stakeholders in the project engage late because they're simply not aware of its existence until late in the project, therefore not understanding the project inputs or outputs. And just as now that they're realizing the fact that the project will affect them in some way, so the stakeholder engagement is in the first and vital process in Agile to make sure that all people know about the project and how it will affect them. The next four categories that we look at are aware project stakeholders. The, the, the first is the opposing or the resistant stakeholder. Now, opposing stakeholders feel that they or the group will be impacted negatively by the project. Explaining why this is not the case or explaining how the project plans to mitigate this impact will assist in the successful interactions with these stakeholders. When dealing with opposing or resistant stakeholders, a project manager must A, identify them and watch them closely. They must listen to what they are trying to say. They meet them one-on-one. And finally, they must determine their motives. And when dealing with opposing stakeholders, one may look for currency of value that may sway them to be a supporting force. The second set of aware stakeholders is the neutral stakeholders. People who are not affected by the project can at least be persuaded to either stay out of the way or possibly even support the project since they have nothing to gain or lose by the project. Sometimes they come by the way of government agencies, testing groups, organizational members that work on other teams, or even supervisors or managers from within the organization but outside of the project. Next, we look at supporting stakeholders. These are the ones that support the projects because they have something that will benefit them, even if indirectly, such as technical logical support or interest groups. Shareholders within the organization play a supporting role. The end user who will gain a new technology also can be coined as a supporting stakeholder. These you want to lead in a good direction to ensure that they maintain their support for the actual project. Finally, we look at the leading stakeholders in the project champions. These are usually the customer, the client, the end user, the manager, the project sponsor, or any of the vendors. Project champions are important to have as allies because they can help persuade stakeholders and other groups. These leaders drive the project with positivity and motivation. They look for ways to make it more efficient and spur on the project into success. An agile focus is instead of focus on engaging with the stakeholders to the extent that they can contribute to the details of solutions within the problems posed by the customers. What the customer wants at the beginning of a project may not be what the customer wants later on in the project. This is due to something getting lost between the requirements the customer has in mind, different technical characteristics of the product. Sometimes the competitive landscape for the changes for the owner or the client, and sometimes the internal political operation within the organization changes. The project manager must categorize these stakeholders in four ways: low interest, low power, and then they monitor them, low interest, high power, and they keep them informed, high interest with low power, and they just keep satisfied. And then there's high interest with high power, and it is important for the project manager to manage them closely. A project manager must vigilantly monitor the engagement of the stakeholders over the course of the project to find overall success with those stakeholders. Thank you for your time.